Greetings YouTube, this is Remarkable Republican, here as always to bring you the truth with a truth-flavored bias. Remember, you can support my crusade by going to LiberaPay and supporting my efforts. I recently finished playing Yakuza Kiwami, and just like Yakuza 0, I find that this game is little more than a thinly veiled vehicle for the homosexual agenda. I'd like to expose how the main plot of this game is nothing more than a gay love triangle. This will fly over the heads of most of the children who play this game, but I think that it is worth noting and that the game should be rated M or even X because of the explicitude of the homosexual content within. The main plot of Yakuza Kiwami, as I said, is a gay love triangle. The three participants of the gay love triangle are Kiryu Kazama, Goro Majima, and Akira Nishikiyama. Kiryu, for his part, loves Nishikiyama and even calls him by the name Nishika, which is supposed to be a term of endearment between two very close people. Nishikiyama just calls Kiryu Kiryu, so this shows you that the relationship is not quite reciprocal. Kiryu loves Nishikiyama so much that he goes to prison for him. Despite having a bright future ahead of him, he was about to get his own family within the Yakuza organization, the Tojo clan, and he also has a quote-unquote girlfriend named Yumi. And this is a woman who Nishikiyama was more or less forcing him to date, while he himself was sort of dating another woman named Reina. That whole thing is a little more complicated. We'll get into that more later on. Then we learn that there is a third participant. As soon as Kiryu gets out of prison after 10 years, he is immediately met by a loose acquaintance named Goro Majima. Majima shows up and demands that the two of them fight. He wants to test Kiryu's strength. He then shows Kiryu that he's lost a step or 10 over the last 10 years, and he challenges Kiryu to get back into shape, and clearly there is a lot of homosexual tension involved with all of that, with Majima being very interested in how strong Kiryu is and all of that. So he then stalks him for the rest of the game. Majima is also someone who has his own family, and he uses all of his various thugs to stalk Kiryu, so this in itself is obsession in its clearest form. And he always seems to take a great deal of enjoyment from his encounters with Kiryu. Now, how does Nishikiyama fit into all of this? Well, as I'll explore, he's not gay. But he is very jealous of Kiryu. He's mad at himself for not dating Yumi and instead setting Kiryu up with her. And he's very much blind to both Kiryu's love for him and Reina's interest in him. So that is why I will argue in the end that Nishikiyama is the tragic hero of Yakuza Kiwami and not Kiryu. Before getting into the three participants in the love triangle, I would like to also highlight some other homosexual characters in Yakuza Kiwami who help to further the homosexual agenda this game is trying to promote. First up is the Florist. The Florist is a friend of Kiryu's, and this is a man who allows other people to call him the Florist, and in fact gave himself that name. As you might be aware, the Florist is not a very masculine name, and being a florist is not a masculine occupation. Almost every florist is a woman. The Florist spends his time running an empire of information, i.e. gossip. This is an inherently womanly or even gay activity. And the Florist also wears open shirts, so he's always showing off his chest and abdomen to the people around him, which is normally a way to show off one's body to the opposite sex. However, all the people he's around are dudes, so clearly he is advertising the goods to other men. So his homosexuality is beyond doubt. Kiryu has a pretty complicated sex life, it is safe to say. One of the two women that he dates on the side is named Yui, and he meets her at a cabaret club. Early on in their interactions, she mentions that she is in fact a lesbian, and that she mostly got into this job to meet hot women. So Kiryu is well aware of her preference early on, but yet he keeps going back to visit the club and to try to deepen his ties with her in the hopes of getting with her. So clearly he's not bothered by this in the slightest. In fact, he asks her questions about it. He's genuinely curious. The two of them eventually do hook up after they go on a date, and Kiryu tells Yui to stop judging people by their gender and choose her sexual partners by other means. This then leads her to give him a chance in bed, and what Kiryu's advice shows is that he clearly does not care if the people he's having sex with are women, and it is the game's way of telling us that Kiryu is a bisexual. And once you understand that about him, and then you look at his relationship with Nishikiyama in detail, and also if you're wondering why Majima thinks that he has a chance with Kiryu, here is the key to unlocking the gay love triangle. It is not immediately obvious unless you understand this plot point. Let's now explore the fascination that Goro Majima has with Kiryu. Majima has been itching for a chance to fight Kiryu for 10 years. However, if you played Yakuza 0, you know that they met at the very end of the game, which occurred 7 years before Kiryu went to prison. This means that there was a long stretch of 7 years where Majima could have tested Kiryu for his might. Now, clearly, he was very interested in Kiryu, and it is quite obvious from the amount of time that Majima spends on Kiryu that he must seek something more than just a chance to have a sparring match. He is looking for an emotional homosexual relationship. His approach to Kiryu on the dubious grounds of testing his strength is clearly, therefore, a pretext. Majima tracks down Kiryu and even employs his family for that task. Now, normally your family in the Yakuza is used to collect money and do things that actually matter. But Majima is making his men help him pursue a homosexual relationship with Kiryu. This means that he must be very effective at his other duties, otherwise someone would relieve him of his command. Stalking Kiryu is literally all that Majima does in this game, even though, while this relationship is developing, at the same time, the head of the Tojo clan has just been assassinated and there's this big power struggle going on in the background. So as a family leader, you might think that Goro Majima has a great deal to gain by getting involved in that, maybe trying to take over the Tojo clan himself, but instead, he's busy trying to provoke interactions with Kiryu. It's all very strange unless you understand that Majima is in love with Kiryu. Just to elaborate further on Goro Majima's choices in this game, he chooses to use his second-in-command Nishida as a go-between and as the guy who sends most of the text messages to Kiryu. This is sort of a common tactic for people who have a crush on someone and are trying to warm them up. This is something that a lot of high school kids do. At one of the cabaret clubs, when Kiryu arrives to meet with Yui or the other girl, he instead is greeted by Goromi, which is literally Goro Majima dressed up in drag, with makeup but still having facial hair and then the big muscles and tattoos. That, needless to say, is deeply disturbing, and it amazes me that there are people who are fans of this game who actually thought that that was funny or in any way acceptable. He also has a special disguise that he uses in the arena, where he wants Kiryu to fight him as the Hanya Man. And because he uses the same fighting style, he's hoping that Kiryu will recognize him from his technique and his physique, so clearly there's a lot of implied homosexuality there. He has another alternative guise when he uses his sort of breakdance style fighting called Everyone's Idol Goro. And in this one he dresses up in outdated 1980s clothing and shows up at a club and also shows up in the streets to fight Kiryu. It's all very strange. There are some encounters you have with him where random thugs will start fights with you, and then in the middle of them, Majima will jump in and attack you. So he's clearly paying these guys off in order to initiate battles with Kiryu, but his object is not to really hurt Kiryu or even really to slow him down. He's just trying to get Kiryu to lay hands on him. There's another time where Majima is so eager to fight Kiryu that he takes a truck and rams it into a big brothel. You would think that as a lusty man of the Yakuza, this would be a place that Majima frequents, but instead he wants to destroy the place just so he can get Kiryu to touch him again. And when he spots Kiryu in the streets, he will literally sprint after him to catch up, chat for a while in a flirtatious way, and then he'll force Kiryu to fight a long battle with him, and then at the end sort of laugh about it. So, the only real explanation for Majima's choices, which is rational, is that Majima is, in fact, an obsessed homosexual who uses all of his power and resources to try to get Kiryu into bed with him. Let's now consider the life that Nishikiyama leads. It's worth noting that unlike Kiryu, who is bisexual, and Majima, who is simply homosexual, Nishikiyama is, so far as I can tell, completely heterosexual. However, he is a cuck for Yumi, and I think it would be easy for someone with an untrained eye to mistake Nishikiyama for a homosexual. After Yumi disappeared, Nishikiyama did not pursue Reina, even though she was clearly interested in him and just as attractive as Yumi. And for a while he was pretending to date Reina to get closer to Yumi and wanted Kiryu to date Yumi so he could keep her around. He is kind of an arch plotter, but he sort of sucks at it, and that's really one of his key flaws. Nishikiyama developed an obsession with power so that he could defeat Kiryu in the battle for Yumi's heart. He thought that if he showed that he was better than Kiryu by beating the shit out of him, that this would win over Yumi. However, Yumi was in love with Kiryu, and all of this could have just been avoided easily if Nishikiyama only had just a touch of gaydar, if he had figured out that Kiryu was a little too interested in him, and that went beyond being lifelong friends. I argue that the real tragic hero of Yakuza Kiwami is Nishikiyama. And if anything, he's the Hamlet of Yakuza universe. I suggest that Sega should make a spin-off all about Nishikiyama getting the story from his perspective. I think it would actually be a much better game, and that the ending would be much more epic in that sense, because I think he could have survived the end of this game, actually. The game truly starts after Kiryu gets out of prison and begins to explore Kamurocho 10 years after he last experienced it. As the story progresses, what happens is that Kiryu has a number of flashbacks to memories of the way things used to be, and in more of those memories than not, he has images in his mind of things that he did with Nishikiyama, but not really all that many memories of Yumi. Yet, when he talks to people, he talks about wanting to find Yumi. So you would think that this would be a thing that he spends a lot of time on. However, even as information continues to pour in regarding Yumi and her sister, Kiryu chooses not to pursue these leads very vigorously. Instead, he spends a lot of time visiting the two cabaret clubs, getting to know two random women. And he also spends a lot of time on random side quests. He goes to an arcade and plays a game about butterflies with kids. He goes to the bowling alley, and he also plays race cars with some young adults who he used to play it with when they were children. So he spends a lot of time fucking around. Yet, he always tells everybody that his primary concern is trying to find Yumi. So it is all very confusing. He doesn't seem to really want to find her, and he also spends quite a bit of time agonizing about how his official reunion with Nishikiyama will go. One time, as he's battling Majima, who is in his element at the batting cages because he often uses a baseball bat, Kiryu lets himself drift off into a daydream and starts talking about his old memories with Nishikiyama at this batting cage. So it's clear where Kiryu's heart actually lies. He's clearly in love with Nishikiyama. that is his true feeling. Yumi was just his cover story for the world. As a Yakuza guy, he can't be openly gay. So that's why he uses Yumi. And also why he's not super interested in finding her. Another piece of evidence is that even though it's clear at this point that Nishikiyama has flipped and gone bad, and also has turned on Kiryu on every level, Kiryu is still reluctant to fight him. And this points to more love than friendship. So clearly his feelings are complicated because he is sort of a spurned lover. He sacrificed everything for Nishikiyama only to be betrayed, and clearly Nishikiyama will never be interested in him the same way that he's interested in Nishikiyama. I think that it's only fitting that we end the video by talking about the final battle which takes place in Yakuza Kiwami. This battle takes place between Kiryu and Nishikiyama, and because of the way that it ends, spoiler, Nishikiyama dies, it will be the last time that they ever spend together. Before the battle, the two men remove their shirts. And in the Yakuza universe, the only reason to remove your shirt is to show off something or try to send a message. Kiryu wants to show off his body to Nishikiyama to let him know what he's missing. Meanwhile, Nishikiyama is fighting Kiryu in front of Yumi for the purpose of showing that he's a better man than Kiryu, but also he wants to show off his physique for her. So both of them are working to different ends, and clearly again, Nishikiyama still hasn't figured out that Kiryu likes him. This shirtless fight is also a callback to the fight with Shimano, who is an apex homosexual in the first half of Yakuza Kiwami, and the battles that Kiryu had with Kuze in Yakuza 0, where Kuze is trying to hold his ground, and he's been trying to recruit Kiryu in a way that is semi-homosexual in nature. The death of Nishikiyama at the end of the game freed Kiryu from his gay crush. As we've seen, Kiryu does often have feelings for women. We see that with his relationship with Yui and his relationship with Rima as well. And when Yumi dies also, this opens up his romantic options. Now he doesn't have to pretend out of a sense of obligation to be interested in this woman that Nishikiyama set him up with. Unfortunately for Kiryu, Reina is already dead, so she won't be an option, although she does seem to have some interest in Kiryu as well. So that could have been a thing, but unfortunately for Kiryu, it is not. And it doesn't appear that Kiryu has any real interest in Majima, although I have not played any of the games beyond Kiwami at this point, and it is my understanding that there are about 6 of these if you go in chronological order in terms of how far into the future they go. So it is possible that something develops between Kiryu and Majima, although I don't feel like Majima is Kiryu's type, because Kiryu is bisexual and also happens to be interested in a number of people, whereas Majima is much more of an obsessive person who is much more monogamous in terms of his preferences. So anyway, that is the plot of Yakuza Kiwami, and how it is, in fact, more or less just a vehicle for the homosexual agenda. Until next time, I'm Remarkable Republican, bringing you the truth with truth-flavored bias, signing out.